let's start by talking about the opening of this office. Obviously, you had to open a new office because of what happened with the NDP and so forth. So let's just start by talking about the opening of the office.
Yeah, so today at 9 a.m. we're inviting people from the community, the Hamilton Center constituency, to come walk through the office, do a tour, and really get reacquainted with this new space. We renovated it to get rid of all the partisan colors and really did what we could to make sure that this felt community-oriented and welcoming.
So how are you dealing with the after effects of everything that's been happening? Obviously, you've been through a lot. This has made international headlines, and you have a very strong opinion on things. Talk to us about what has been going on with you and where you're at right now.
Yeah, so in the last month, obviously a genocide broke out in Gaza and Palestine. I had put out a statement, and not everyone agreed with the framing of the statement. I think, in retrospect, people had issue with my words around calling Israel an apartheid state and mentioning settler colonialism. But I had put a statement out 3 days after the initial Hamas attacks, when the Rafah border closed, when water and food were being withheld from people in Palestine, because it was obvious at that point that there was genocidal intent. And I couldn't in good faith be a representative of this Hamilton Center getting emails from Palestinians in my riding and not say something, right? And so I dealt with the aftermath, and I'm now an independent member of the Legislative Assembly, and we're here today with new staff, with a really committed team to say we're focused on casework. We want to make sure that people who need help are continuing to get help, and we're going to continue to be a community-oriented space that's focused on, working class issues, but also like speaking truth when we're asked to and when we're called to. I think that's why I ran for office, and that's why we're here. So I'm really excited to see everyone. It was a scary time in the last month. We got a ton of death threats. We had to close down for a bit, but we're not in hiding anymore. We're facing issues head on, and yeah, I think overall the genocide has gotten so bad that people are seeing it for what it is. There's no more hiding. There's no more two-sidesing it. It's a genocide, and people are hurting. So I'm committed to calling for a ceasefire while also pushing for issues here locally. Most of the calls that we've been getting as of late, I would say in the last 2 or 3 weeks, have been around ODSP and also the HSR strike, folks struggling to get around in our community. So we're just focusing on helping people where we can. And yeah, I'm hoping today will be a really good time.
Well, I do want to get back to what you said about the comments that you've made. And we're your Hamilton hometown station. Our viewers are your constituents.
Yep.
And we also get emails. And so we get people who ask questions about both sides. So I'd like you to clarify, because there were people heard you saying there's a phrase, and I'm not going to say the whole thing because it is considered anti-Semitic, about from the river. You know the phrase that I'm referring to. People heard you saying that. And for some segments of the population, or most, or whoever, I'm being neutral, they feel that means that you're against Jewish people and against a certain segment of the population. Can you clarify why you said that? Do you believe that? Do you understand why some people are offended by that? Tell me your thoughts about that.
Yeah. From my understanding, the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a Palestinian call, and I'm not Palestinian, first of all, but my understanding of the phrase is just for a call for peace and an end to the apartheid state. People are, for lack of a better term right now, in an open-air prison. This morning, the death toll was almost at 12,000 Palestinians dead in the span of a month, maybe. And so that phrase that community has been using is saying that we need an end to the apartheid state, that people are calling for freedom. And again, I'm not Palestinian, and I'm not trying to get into
the politics of it, but
the nitty gritty, but that's why I use the phrase.
But
right?
You are a politician.
Yes.
And so, because you represent all of your constituents, whether they're Palestinian, Jewish, Canadian, whatever, that phrase does have connotations, and so, and it's it's made public, those connotations, that some people believe that means it's been used up by Hamas, it's been used by others. So I'm asking, do you recognize that? And do you recognize that why some people are offended?
I can understand that, but I'm following the leadership of Palestinians who are grieving like the murder of their families, right? Rashida in the States has been censured as well for use of the term, and she's Palestinian. From before I was elected, even as a student, people said that me supporting BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanction, CSH put that out, the spec put that out, that I was involved in BDS, and therefore people said that I was being anti-Semitic. This has followed me my entire career, even before I ran for office, and I think the media has a responsibility to be really careful what we're calling anti-Semitic or not, because it literally has stopped Palestinians from being able to talk about the open air prison. When I shared something about a detained prisoner who was detained for 10 years and died in prison in Israel, occupied territory over there, again, I was forced to like talk about that being anti-Semitic and that hurting the Jewish community. I understand where people are coming from, but my goal right now is to center those who are being the most harmed. And as a Black person, as somebody who has been involved in civil rights discourse for my entire life at 29, from the moment I got involved in BDS, I was labeled as like causing harm to community. So I am very aware of that, but at the same time, when community are saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, it's the onus on the media to hear where that's coming from, to hear that it's coming from the pain. We can spend the rest of the interview time talking about that one phrase if you would like to, but I'm welcoming you here to talk about the opening, why we're here today, to say that we're here for community, to welcome people in, to talk about, you know, issues that people want solved. I can continue to debate you on the use of the phrase, but I don't think that's worth it.
I'm not debating, and I apologize.
No, it's okay.
If it sounds like it. I just wanted to give you the opportunity because, and like I said, from the CHCH point of view, is what we're trying to do is people want to hear that you're a politician representing all people, and that the constituents of Hamilton come first. And yes, everything that's happening certainly is troubling to many, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to all of your constituents.
Absolutely. I represent all my constituents for sure. I don't support genocide. And so I think when we're talking about terms that community are using who are grieving right now, this morning the death toll was at 12,000, I want to be very clear. I'm calling for a ceasefire. I don't support genocide. I grew up in a time period where, you know, Muslims were called terrorists after 9/11. These words do matter, and we need to be very clear that we're not vilifying an entire community for a use of a phrase that has been translated to English that's a call for liberation and peace and freedom from an apartheid state. That's what that is.
And so what about representing your office and now
Absolutely.
You're independent? How do you feel the fact that you are censured and you can't speak and your voice cannot be heard?
Yeah, so tomorrow, my lawyers will be filing a judicial review on the censure. We're planning to fight that in court. Feeling that will be exploring other legal avenues, but we are not of the mindset that the censure was legal. To censure somebody indefinitely using censure protocol for something that was said outside of the house on social media. So we will be fighting that. I have every intention to get the censure undone, and we're going to exhaust all remedies using legislative processes as well, including pushing for a motion to undo the censure. In the meantime, what I'm planning to do is focus on casework. I think the reason that I got elected here in Hamilton Center was to support those who needed help navigating systems in the first place. Most of the calls we do get are around navigating OW and ODSP. I plan to be out in community supporting those who need access to support. And in the meantime, I will be going back to Queen's Park to vote on important issues. And yes, I can't speak during question period, but let's be honest, question period is full of theatrics. And my goal,
How so?
it's question period is a time where people aren't actually listening or having honest debate. It's, from what I've seen, people yelling at each other across the aisle, people laughing at each other. The first time that I felt really uncomfortable in question period was when there was a question brought up about a hospice center needing to use a food bank, and the answer to that question was a lot of laughter, and the phrasing that, like, the reason things are difficult, the reason why public services are using food banks like that is because of a carbon tax, right? So it's not a real conversation. And I think, yeah, I'll still be there. I'll vote when I need to vote, but I'm committed to people, everyday people, and supporting people who need access to resources here. And again, we are going to be fighting to undo the censure and doing everything that we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because the censure wasn't just about me as an individual. It was an attack on every single person right now who's afraid to speak up for what is right, who is afraid to speak up against genocide in our communities. We're also seeing teachers, journalists, students, all facing reprimand in different forms, no matter where they are, for talking about Palestinian human rights and for talking about this genocide. And we are seeing it in the States too. Other elected officials being censured, and across the world, really.
And I do hear that. And Canadians have always been thought of as peacekeepers, as the people who try to bring both sides together. And I think that's where some of the pushback has been, at least from what we've seen in our responses, where people say, well, how do you bring people together? Like, how are you able to bring Jewish and Palestinians together as a politician? Are you able to step away from the activism and perform more as a politician and bring sides together?
Does Canada tend to bring people together? If that's true, then why did we abstain from a vote for a ceasefire?
But I'm saying for you.
What I'm saying is, I don't think there is anything controversial for calling for a ceasefire. What I'm hearing is that I called for one too early. And I think there's not a right amount of people to die to have called for a ceasefire. Every single political person who's on the right side of this, who cares, is now calling for a ceasefire. There are more people calling for a ceasefire than less, in my opinion, because this conflict needs to end, and there was nothing wrong with my statement or what I put out. And I'll continue to say that, but again, if we want to spend media time talking about that specifically, I understand.
It's hard. It's hard.
It's okay.
Not, you know what I mean? It's
I understand why, but like, again, I will.
Well, as for the censure, let's go to that.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's for you. I mean, if your voice can't be heard, no matter what you think, you can't fight for people if your voice can't be heard. So from our experts are saying that can't be changed because of the way Parliament is set up. I don't know what your attorneys are telling you, but they're saying that it can't be changed.
It definitely, I think it can, and so do my lawyers. I would recommend that they're willing to speak to as well. Democracy Now! Has also weighed in. We believe that the censure can be overturned, and there's precedent for that as well. Other decisions that have come out of the Legislative Assembly have been overturned. We do not think, especially because so many opinions have shifted toward a ceasefire, that I should have been censured. And not only that, when I had put up my statement, the Premier had said that I was supporting the rape and murder of innocent Israelis, even though I had put up a clarifying statement condemning Hamas. The censure was based around what he was saying I said, and also support for Hamas. So the censure is not based in actual fact, and I'm looking forward to continuing to fight that in court. We're filing the judicial review request tomorrow.
And where do things stand with the NDP and Marit Stiles? Have you had a conversation with her? Do you feel betrayed by them? Do you feel betrayed by her?
I have not heard from Marit Stiles since I was kicked out of caucus on the day that I was getting censured. No one has reached out. I'm really committed to just moving forward as an independent. There doesn't seem like an avenue back. I've not heard from anyone. So
would you like to go back?
It depends. It would have to be a process. There's definitely a possible pathway to reentry, but it would require a conversation which has not occurred. So I'm not shutting that door, but what I'm saying is that I'm here as an independent. I'm looking forward to just reconnecting with constituents and doing what I can to support people here.
But what do you tell constituents? I mean, what are you telling them now? Obviously, they have questions. What are you telling them?
What kind of
when
questions?
They're obviously going to ask about this. Like I said, I don't want to push that issue, but again, I'm trying to make sure that the constituent is the one here that is understanding who you are, what you're about, how you represent all people, or how you represent all constituents who may have concerns, what do you tell them?
I honestly think that many constituents here are struggling with affordability. They're struggling to make rent. Many people are struggling with evictions who come through our office. Many people are struggling to get in contact with their caseworkers who are on social assistance. A lot of people in Hamilton Center just can't get by as it is. And I think that is the focus, and that is who I'm interested in helping. People who have no other supports in community right now, who need somewhere to go. I want to be that political home. And I'm looking forward to doing that work. If people have questions about my stances, what I can say is this. I have always been someone who's committed to justice and peace. And again, calling for a ceasefire is something that many people started to do weeks after I put up my statement, when there was a right-sized death toll. It is not a bad thing. Calling for a ceasefire is not a bad thing. Calling a spade is not a bad thing.
What do you say to the Jewish community here?
I'll say what I said. People have questions about my condemnation of Hamas. That's out there. I already put that out there. I take issue with the genocide, and I take issue with Canada not calling for a ceasefire. And I think many people have that concern as well, including Jewish people in our communities. I think we're all on the right side of this in terms of wanting this conflict to end and understanding that many people are grieving. And as much as the media will try to frame me as being as opposition to something or in opposition to the Jewish community, I know that to not be true. I know that everybody wants this conflict to be end. I know that nobody wants people to die right now. And a lot of us are sitting at home, scrolling on our phones, watching the death toll continue to rise, and our federal government is failing us in failing to call for a ceasefire. And so to the Jewish community, I say this, again, which I posted online, I'm sorry for the harm that I caused, or the harm that was perceived in my statement. However, calling for a ceasefire, that's not something I'm willing to take back or retract. Calling Israel an apartheid state is what it is. South Africa pulled its delegation, its dignitaries out of Israel in understanding that Israel is an apartheid state, and people are in an open air prison right now. That these are not statements that I will take back or I can take back. But again, I think the entire community is on the same page with wanting this genocide to end. And I want liberation, and I want people to be free.
Have you met with local Palestinian leaders and local Jewish leaders in Hamilton or the area? Have you been able to?
Our office is just opening today. So when I put my statement up, we received a mass amount of death threats to the point where 2 staff members quit because it was that scary. And so this office opening today is the first day where we're actually opening and welcoming people in. I would welcome anybody who wants to come have a conversation. Come see us. We're here. That's why we're here today and opening. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing to have these conversations.
Do you have any type of security or police protection, or do you have any type of way of protecting you and your staff?
All Legislative Assembly elected officials has the option of, navigating with provincial police services, and safety plans have been given to every MPP. But I think we have a good security plan as a House team. I'm not scared, and we're not scared, and that's why we're reopening our doors. We have work to do and people to serve, but I was just saying that to answer your question of have I done a lot of work reaching back out? Not yet, but I'm welcoming people to come back into our space now that we're open and ready to serve people. Come take a look, have a sit down, and I'm open to having conversations.
So what about conversation with Doug Ford, the Premier?
I don't know if he wants to. He didn't really respond that well to my libel notice. I don't know if there's much to say.
He's the Premier.
Yeah.
And again, you're a politician, you represent people, you have to have, if your voice can't be heard, you can't represent your population. Or
Doug Ford is not he's not a super accessible person. So what I will say is this, if he wants to have a conversation, we'll have a conversation. But he did say that I supported the rape and murder of innocent Israelis based on my statement, which is not true. I called for a ceasefire. So yeah, if he wants to have a conversation about that, I would be down. But until then, I'm pursuing legal avenues.
Do you plan to do more? I know you were at a rally in Toronto, pro-Palestinian. Do you plan to do more of that type of appearance and that type of...
Hamiltonians know that for the duration of my entire political career, since I was 19, so that spans a decade, I have shown up every time there was a call for justice around race, around disability, around affordability, every sort of issue that comes up that calls for support of people who are oppressed. I have been there. So it's no surprise that one of the biggest issues right now, which is the first genocide in my generation that we're watching live on our phones, that I would be there. That doesn't mean I'm putting aside other issues that I care about. That's a very colonial way of thinking about tackling issues. As an intersectional feminist, as someone who cares about equity in its fullest form, I will continue to show up as people are oppressed. And so if that means a rally to support the Palestinian struggle tomorrow, yeah, I'll be there. If there's a rally to support HSR workers, which there was, and I was there, I'll be there, locally. I don't think supporting one issue means you're dropping other issues. That's a very colonial, white-centric way of thinking about struggle.
But the question, the issue is not that you're leaving one issue to deal with the next. The issue is by being pro-Palestinian, that leaves out your Jewish
I think that's a very offensive framing. There are many, many, many Jewish contingents that have been at these protests. Everyone is calling for a ceasefire and for an end to this genocide, and to frame it as just a Palestinian struggle is terrible framing from the media, and we have to do better at that. There's independent Jewish voices.
But there's people who say, and I'm this is not me saying this, I'm just clarifying.
But when you say people, I want you to cite who. Which organizations are you talking to that say this? What are you cite?
When we get comments from viewers or whatever.
So cite who you're talking about. Which, because I know independent Jewish voices have been there. I know that it was a Jewish contingent that was protesting at Union Station.
But you understand that you're controversial, and that's why.
I'm controversial, or the issue is? I'm just trying to understand where you're citing it, that Jewish people are not coming to these pro-Palestinian protests.
No, I'm not, and I'm going to sort of back away because I don't want you to misunderstand me.
I don't want you to misunderstand me, so we're on the same page here. But what I'm telling you is that these protests have been supported by everybody. The Tamil community, the Black community, the Jewish community has shown up in droves, and I don't want you to walk away misinterpreting that either. Everybody wants an end to this genocide, and everybody is calling for a ceasefire.
And your statements are your statements, and I don't want to misrepresent it. What I do want to clarify is for those who do feel offended or troubled by the statements, that group, is there a way to
Again, I've answered this question numerous times. I called for a ceasefire. I already in my statement condemned Hamas and the actions of Hamas. I called for a ceasefire. I called Israel an apartheid state because that's what it is according to the United Nations, Michael Link, UN Rapporteur on the Palestinian territories. I cited the UN with those statements. So if people have a problem with those statements, take it up with the United Nations. In the meantime, I'm calling for an end to the genocide and a ceasefire, and continuing to show up because people in this riding have family back home that are continuing to be bombed. I know somebody yesterday who had family bombed. We can keep fighting about the harm that I specifically caused because it's easier to do that, but take it up with the United Nations. Take it up with history that's calling this an apartheid state. It's an apartheid state, and this is a genocide, and it needs to end, and calling for a ceasefire is not contributing to harm. And if people have an issue with that, take it up with the United Nations definition of an apartheid. But I cannot continue to waste time answering that question about invisible harm that I specifically caused as an individual, or this framing that Jewish people are not calling for the same things that I'm calling for, because it's untrue, wholly. Do you have another question that's not related to this?
Yeah, so what is your priority now?
My priority, as I've said, is to focus on Hamilton Center and the people here who need support. Many people here are being evicted. There's a housing crisis. People right now who are disabled can't get around because of the transit strikes. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with ATU 107 and our community to make sure that their demands are being met. Many people are struggling with costs of food and supports there. So in our office, we're just connecting people to resources as much as we can. Our riding has some of the highest childhood poverty rates in the whole of Hamilton. And so we're focused here on making sure people have access to what they need as quick as possible. We have a new staff team of about 4 people who are all newly unionized with SEIU Local 2, and we're here and we're ready to get back to work. And I'm looking forward to welcoming everybody into the office today.
Moving forward, what are your office hours? How accessible are you? Why don't you tell me all
So
this?
our office hours are pretty standard with across all the MPPs. We're open 9 to 4. We're every day. We're closed to the public on Wednesdays just to catch up on admin work, but we're here 9 to 4 every day. And if you call after hours, we still will get back to you. Our voicemails are always accessible. You can also email us at sjama-co for any constituency work at all hours.
Do you have a specific plan or priority of any of those issues that you'll be tackling first? It's a lot of issues. Like
I mean,
the
the issues that we tackle are day to day depending on, who comes through our doors. So if someone's being evicted that same day, we will reprioritize. We kind of triage the emergency cases that come through our doors every single day. So it's hard for me to set a priority per week to be like, this is the one issue we're taking on. That's not how it works. It's kind of like ad hoc social work constituency office. You never know who's going to walk through the door, but you have to have a commitment to just supporting them as they come in. So
anything else? I want to open the floor to you that you want people to know about you and any misunderstandings or anything. I mean, we've covered a lot, but I just want to give you the opportunity to say whatever you feel maybe we haven't asked or that you want people to know.
The last thing I would say is that, over the course of my career, which has spent a decade so far in Hamilton, I have been committed to calling for justice and for peace across all issues. I have a really great track record of doing so. And so while I might not be agreed with all of the time, know that I'm guided by justice and supporting those who are the most vulnerable at any given time. And intersectional work doesn't mean you just care about one issue. As a Black, disabled, Muslim, elected politician who's also 29, I think I'm the second youngest in the province to be elected, that is reflected in my politics. And how I will continue to serve this riding is supporting those who are the most oppressed at any given time.
And in terms of Hamiltonians, you feel that you can be, as a politician, not an activist, but as a politician, you can you can help all constituents, no matter if they have a different background than yours.
Yeah, that's how I got elected, right? I won in every single poll as a Black, Muslim, disabled person. I think the fact that I fit so many different boxes, I grew up on ODSP, I understand what it's like to struggle with affordability and cost of living in this riding like so many people do. Of course I can serve everybody, and I believe I have been doing so, and just because I'm calling for an end to a genocide does not mean that I cannot. And I think I get asked that question because I am of a different race and because I'm disabled, and I think the media is under the impression that I cannot relate to everybody, but that's untrue. Remember that I won.
You can relate to
remember,
because I'm just going to put it on the table.
So your concern here, sitting in front of me, is just for the Jewish constituency.
Not the concern, but the questions.
We got people here.
No, I want to answer this one question. So yes, I do, because
the media didn't make it.
That is how you can. I'll remind you of your earlier question of like framing the protests as just being Palestinian protests, as though Jewish people are not going to these protests. You have to be careful with your framing. Yes, I believe I can represent Jewish constituency, and again, I believe many Jewish people are calling for an end to this genocide too, and are calling for a ceasefire. And just because I have called for those things does not mean I cannot represent different religious constituencies. I think that's a false assertion to make.
Well, thank you for clarifying. that's it's clarification. When I said pro-Palestinian, meaning the rally was about Palestine, not meaning it was only for Palestine. So allow me to please.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. The media has had a lot of room to
all I want is, like I said,
correct themselves.
We're your local station.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we've given you every opportunity, respectfully, to make sure that people understand who you are and how you're representing Hamiltonians. And I thank you, because I know it's not easy, a lot of what's happening, but we try to be as fair, and I hope you see that I really want you to share with people what you represent. So I do thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, Grant LaFleche from the Hamilton Spectator.
Hi.
How you doing?
I didn't recognize you with the hat there.
I know. Well, we haven't actually met face to face. We've only spoken on the phone, I think. Going back to your ouster from the NDP, I mean, I've seen your letter to the Premier about the censure, but specifically about your ouster from the NDP, Leader Stiles has made it very clear on a number of occasions that she made the decision that she did because, from her point of view, you had broken faith or trust with caucus on multiple occasions. It had nothing actually to do with the content of your views on the war in Gaza or Palestine, but on a repeated series of incidences, which, to be fair, she's not specified, where you have said you do one thing but do another, and you've not really spoken to that. So when she says that, from your point of view, what does she mean? I mean, have you broken trust with the NDP, with the leader and its caucus on multiple occasions beyond the series of incidents that led to your censure?
I don't know. So first of all, I found out that I was being kicked out of caucus at the same time that everybody else did, through an email. As
You
I was,
found out through an email?
yeah, as I was heading in for the censure about 5 minutes before. So I found out the same time that everybody else did, about being kicked out of caucus. I have not heard from Marat Stiles, like, leading up to that or after. So I can't actually answer the question of specifically why I've been kicked out or what led to that. I can only speculate. I believe it had to do with my statement and calling Israel an apartheid state and mentioning settler colonialism. If that's wrong, I'm open to hearing about that. But from my understanding, there wasn't caucus consensus to kick me out. There wasn't a meeting, because I found out the same time that everybody else did.
Prior to that, though, Sarah, did you have, I mean, how would you characterize your relationship either with Leader Stiles or caucus generally? Because the thing that they keep telling the press is, it's not this one thing, it's a series of things that predate, say, October 7th, and your reaction to that.
I don't have evidence for that. I've been elected 7 months. I feel like I've been getting along with everyone quite well. I think that what I can speculate, again, because I haven't talked to people about this, was that it had a lot to do with my actual statement. And throughout this process, I feel as though the media has been used as an HR tool, but we haven't actually had communication within caucus. And again, I don't agree with that, so I don't really want to get into speculating too much, because we haven't had those conversations, and the door is open if people want to have those conversations. But until then, I'm going to be here as an independent and try to do what I can to serve people. But what I will say is, I'm disappointed that the media has been used as an HR tool instead of these direct conversations. And I'm hopeful that these conversations will continue to occur. But until then, I'll just be operating as an independent and maybe looking for a different political home.
Just two more questions. One of which, and forgive me if my colleague had already asked you this from CH before I arrived. It's true when you walked through a moment ago about, you know, all the sort of who you are and how you got elected, you know, as a younger black disabled person, Muslim, you know, you checked all those boxes you thought were the reason you got voted into office. You were also elected, though, as a member of the NDP. This is an NDP stronghold riding, and so there are people who vote for the NDP because it's an NDP candidate. I mean, this was Ms. Horwath's riding for a very long time. Do you think that the people of this riding are now disappointed that you no longer fly that flag, and you don't have the backing of a political party, that even without the censure as an independent, life for you in the House is much, much different in terms of being able to get questions asked or be in a committee? What do you say to those voters in Hamilton Centre who may say, Sarah Jama's been interested in your issues and the things that move you, but not necessarily those who voted for you as a member of the NDP?
I don't think people think that at all, like at all. I think what I've been receiving, other than scary death threats, I would say not from people in this riding, has been a lot of support locally for standing up for justice, for saying the right thing. A lot of people are waking up to the truth about what I was saying. A lot of people elected me knowing that I speak the truth and I'll say the right thing no matter what the cost is. I don't think that's a surprise. I think the voter turnout has been incredibly low, not only in Hamilton, but across the province. And I think the value of electing someone who's going to speak truth to power and not sway on my political opinion based on the issue of the day or the cost is a wake-up call to everybody that politics can happen differently. And I do agree that having a party home makes it easier to do the job. And it's unfortunate that this happened. Again, I was kicked out. I found out I was kicked out at the same time that everybody else did, the same exact moment. And so I was also shocked and disappointed.
Never called you. She never said, Sarah, we're done.
Again, I don't want to
treat
treat the media like an HR tool,
Yeah.
but I'll answer that question to say, no, I didn't receive a call. I didn't. I found out as I was rolling into my seat. So I'm also disappointed. I'm opening that door for a conversation, should a conversation happen in the future, or maybe I'll be looking for a political home somewhere else. I do understand that it's more difficult to operate as an individual, but in the meantime, I'm going to be doing what I can to do so, to be helping people, and that's the point of welcoming people in today, to say that we're here, we want to operate, we have a full staff team, and we're ready to serve people, and I think that's going to be the focus.
Just one last question, Sarah, and again, I know you're going to be retreading a bit from your CH interview, and you're probably tired of some of these questions, but just as you said, it's important for the media to be aware of how we're framing things. You were on stage this past weekend for one of the pro-Palestinian ceasefire rallies.
Mm-hmm.
You shared that stage with a gentleman from Toronto for Palestine, who said, whilst you're on stage on the microphone, that the hostages that Hamas took on October 7th, which I remind you, many of which are civilians who were attending a music festival, who are just as innocent as the people of Gaza who've been killed in the last 2 or 3 weeks, that they will only be released if political prisoners are released by Israel, which is a pro-Hamas kind of argument. That same group has also said Palestine has to go back to 1948, which is, as you know, the year of the founding of Israel, implying that should not have happened. And right after October 7th, the same group posted on Instagram some overt Holocaust denial, saying that Israel was lying about October 7th, and if they were lying about that, maybe they were lying about the Holocaust.
I don't actually know, I don't know what you're citing in terms of Toronto for Palestine or what that one individual said. What I will say is this. I put up a statement. I called for a ceasefire. Let me finish before you interrupt, please. I called for a ceasefire. I called for an end to this genocide. I condemned Hamas in my statement. I cannot speak for everybody's intentions who has an issue with the genocide going on. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself and why I was at the protest alongside Keep Me Ontario, alongside the Ontario Federation of Labour, alongside the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Why we were all there was to call for a ceasefire. So you can pick and choose, individuals who are speaking. Let me finish. You can pick and choose each individual organization and why they were there and what they were saying and ask me to comment on it. I will not do so. Thank you for.
Sorry, my question though is.
Go ahead.
You represent, as I think my colleague from CH has alluded to in one of her last questions, there are Jewish people in your constituency, some of whom support your view on this, some of whom do not. But if you're sharing the stage with someone who makes those kind of anti-Semitic statements, and you're there, Mr. Green was there with you as well, and I know that's not your view, it's not his view, but you're nonetheless there on stage with them. I mean, does that not make them feel more unsafe than they already do? And how does that help with a climate where there is this marked rise in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and tension? And if you're, as an elected person, sharing the stage with someone who's saying those things, what message does that send? And what do you say to those who now feel less safe? Because
elected people go to rallies all the time and cannot be held accountable for what each individual says when they get to the mic. However, calls for an end to the genocide, calls for calls for a ceasefire, calls for an end to the apartheid state. I agree with all of those statements. I cannot speak to or get into everything everybody says at the mic. That's just how it is.